starting again. But luckily this time I shouldn't have issues with the sharing because I didn't touch the positioning of this one. So I was saying that basically platforms are capable of enabling ecosystems, so empowering entities and roles into exchanging value. And this is, I would say, the beauty and the beast of platform thinking, because, of course, I mean, we can give tools to entities in order to start exchanging more value, taking the assumption that maybe these transactions that are already happening in ecosystems are not efficient enough and there is room for improvement. And also, platforms are giving this tool to allow for extreme personalization of the items, activities, products, services exchanged. So we really can give back the capability and the power to entities to shape their own services, the tailor-made services, the highly personalized services. But then, by doing this, platform can also put them into connection, put the entities into connection with the technology, with tools, with knowledge, distributed knowledge, digital fabrication, for instance, the capability to fast prototype and realize and make what they really want to make. So platform and platform thinking is essentially about enabling this self-personalization, so really reinforcing the meaning and the impact of the long tail, so allowing multiple and very frequent interaction between a high multiplicity of different kind of entities on the producers and on the consumer side. And also, they are managing to accomplish this. So they are making what is culturally desirable technically possible and vice versa, and what is technically possible culturally desirable. So this is very important, because when we are speaking about platform, we are not speaking about technologies, we are not speaking about portals, about web or applications or software application. We are first and most importantly speaking about business models that are allowing this hidden potential in ecosystem that is residing into entities to be exchanged, to unleash, to be, to grow. And by doing this also to allow entities to match their special expectations, so to accomplish what they really want to accomplish. I'm not sure that you're familiar with this drawing, this triangle, but this more or less captures what we define the unified market theory that we developed. And this unified market theory tells us that platforms are in the middle, so they represent the middle layer, the aggregating layer, the network orchestrator layer. But what is this aggregator? What they are aggregating? They're essentially aggregating a couple of important things. On one side, they're cherry picking the right infrastructural components, services, and reshaping them, rebundling them in such a way that is they are more friendly usable by the entities, the fragmented entities, the multiple entities that are in the long tail markets. So a platform can provide marketplace interfaces help by interconnecting users of different kinds. So from the, I would say, from the producing side to the consuming side, and then they are supporting them. So they are providing this infrastructure, we say this set of tools, channels, services that are really supporting and empowering these entities to perform better. So they have a huge impact. They are capable of scaling very fast because they grow thanks to network effects. The more users perceive the value of using a platform strategy to thrive, to grow, the more value this platform gains. And so this augmented value attracts more users. And this is a very positive, strongly reinforcing mechanism. So if we are capable of injecting this principle of regeneration in the platform design, so in these channels and services, we really can scale these behavioral approaches in a very efficient way. We are capable of reaching a lot of entities, or maybe multiple communities. If we are scaling, instead of scaling up, we are scaling across our platform strategy in different contexts. I have some examples, so I'll be a little more explicit and clearer in a moment. So essentially, platforms are not technologies, but they are basically scalable agreements for value creation. Everything is about creating the condition for entities to thrive and perform at their best through platform strategies. Then when we do the design of platform strategies, what we really do is we design a couple of pillars, what we call transaction engine and what we call learning engine. Transaction engine is about understanding what are the transactions already in place in an ecosystem, and then try to make more efficient, transform them into being more efficient. So understanding what are the frictions, what are the entry barriers, what are the inefficiencies of these transactions, of these exchanges of value with the broadest definition of value, and optimize it, reducing frictions and entering into a non-zero-sum gain mood or in a win-win approach. So all the parties involved in the transaction should be perceiving that they gain something in the transaction. Is not that there shouldn't be a loser and a winner after this transaction. The second engine is probably more important, and this is what we call the learning engine. And it's about understanding the evolutionary journeys we can offer to the entities with platform experiences so that they can perform at their best. It's about understanding what are the blocking points for entities, what are the elements and I would say the inefficiencies they need to deal with instead of focusing on the real value creation. So you can think about, for instance, understanding what are I would say the inefficiencies in terms of bureaucracy, administrative burdens, the incapability of reading the reality, and so platform on providing these services that are seen as true allies by the entities on both sides, on the supply side and the consuming side, so that they can perform in a very positive way, in a very efficient way. Well, this is a little complicated, but you have the slide in your slide deck. The most important thing is that platform, they do one thing very different from traditional businesses. They don't provide solutions to final problems. They're always enabling ecosystemic entities to create these solutions for these needs, for the couple of problem solutions needs. They are offering tools, enabling tools, services that are allowing entities to create their own solutions for a specific reason, because, well, I'm going to go through this one in a clearer way. Platform thinking is a principle-based design framework. And among these principles, there are some of them. We defined 7 principles, but now I'm just collecting 4 of them. And the specific reason why we are enabling the ecosystem to create solutions is based on these principles. So first of all, platform design is a design for emergence. It's always a design for an ecosystem, and it's not a design of an ecosystem. So we never design a new ecosystem. This is impossible. It's like providing solutions for problems that don't exist. What we do instead is we try to map an ecosystem. We try to understand what are the entities that are creating value. They are actually building that ecosystem. And then we design for them. We assess the most important, the main drawbacks, the main problems these entities have in the ecosystem, and then we provide them tools that are empowering them to do better. Then we enable self-organization capabilities to provide mass customization. This is the principle I was referring to. We always try to foster self-agency and I will say entrepreneurship in a positive way. So putting back the responsibility of their own actions into the entities. We're really empowering them to become more professional, to become more entrepreneurial, to become, in general, to be responsible for their value creation. And you guess what? Where I'm landing with my reasoning. If we are capable to transferring to them not only the venture building capacity, but also the regenerative building capacity, then we have a win-win solution now, because we can guide them into becoming more entrepreneurial, but also more responsible to take into account the liabilities of what they are making. And this is a dynamic active creation of solutions that maybe are regenerative instead of exploitative. Then we always design for interconnect. Oh, well, this is a very crazy word. I always made some mistakes. We design for interconnectedness. So that means that platform thinking is about putting entities in relationship. We don't design for isolation. This is typically a wrong consequence of a poorly applied human-centered design. I'm not saying that human-centered design is not good, but sometimes when you apply it superficially, then it leads to isolating entities, to defining them, to putting labels to them without considering that their value is established in their interactions and relationship with other entities. It's not a value per se. It's always important to understand how these relationships are moving in the systems. And so, last but not least, that is very important, we always design for disobedience. What do I mean by disobedience? I don't mean that everyone could do whatever they want. Disobedience means that we are gonna work on a loose design when we design channels and services in our platform strategy. Loose design means that we are constraining the possibilities of entities, so what they can do through the platform, but not that much. We are not creating silos. We are giving them, I would say, open enough interfaces so that they can accomplish what they want to accomplish, but they can also try to innovate on top of these services, of these boundaries, of this organizational framework offered by platform. And this is particularly important because platforms and ecosystem are defined also as a future sensing engine. So that means that we're going to provide some capabilities to the entities, and then typically use them to unleash their value creation capabilities. But then someone, sooner or later, will try to stretch a little bit these boundaries and use the services and tools to create some additional value that we didn't expect before. We didn't design for that value creation. I can make an example. No, you're probably familiar with Airbnb, and 99% of users are using Airbnb to short-term rent some spaces, some rooms, some houses. But there are people, for instance, that start using Airbnb to rent offices or to, of course, offer offices. Someone also used Airbnb to offer space for luggages. And so Airbnb didn't block this opportunity. They really allowed, for instance, to use the same tools, channels, and interactive experiences offered by Airbnb to sell something different. It was not originally foreseen and designed for. But they didn't block this, and they learned a lot from this experience, from this fact, because another important principle of platform is that they are really ready to capture value and support value creation from anywhere. So the basic principle, the foundational principle of a platform thinker and a platform shaper is that you know that you don't know. I'm quoting Socrates, but this is particularly true because it's very bold and it's very bossy to be, to try to decide up front what is the value and what should be created and what shouldn't be created in an ecosystem. So why don't we leave it open? We don't vet ourselves, we don't cap it up front, and we give these tools and enablers to entities so that they can use these tools to build whatever they want to build, of course, in the given boundaries of the ecosystem per se. Then a couple of, 5 slides more, the important, and then we start having the most important parts of the conversation. Then business models. Platforms are offering to the ecosystem a lot of different interfaces. And we call these interfaces also experiences. So end-to-end journeys to entities connecting suppliers with consumers of value. And to each of these experiences, you can imagine, you can attach a business model. And the resulting platform business model will be the composition of the different sustainability or business models, each one attached to a single experience. I make a bad example. You are familiar with Facebook, I guess. Facebook is offering at least 2 different experiences to the ecosystem. One experience is offered to the general users, so me, you, and all of us, that are publishing for free, apparently, our personal data on the platform. And the business model attached to these experiences, of course, are free of use. I mean, apparently free of use. But then, of course, they are creating another kind of experience targeting companies that want to advertise themselves through the digital marketing platform interface of Facebook. And in the case, the business model is a paid business model. No, it's a business model that's basically very simple. It's a pay-per-click, pay-per-use, pay-per impression. So this to say what and to mean what. That we can imagine a lot of different business models that are sustaining the value creation of different parts of the platform strategy. But basically, these business models, they can belong to 2 large families. One family is what we call the transactional business models that are based on the transaction engine. So the marketplace, where we are helping entities get in touch and transact and exchange something. And then, of course, we can intermediate this transaction and take a take rate, as it's technically called, so a percentage of the value exchanged by the entities. But these platforms typically they have a more utilitaristic nature, because they are there to serve a quick need, a quick exchange between entities. The other family is what we call the learning business models, or the business model based on learning engines. And to me, and especially for regeneration, they are, I would say, more interesting, because they are not taking into account the transactions. They are supporting transactions, of course, but they are not charging them. They're not taxing them. Because what they really want is to create, if you're thinking about a learning business model, you want to hold a space where entities on the supply side and on the demand side are meeting, are encountering, are conversating, are interacting in order to create something together, to access these tools and elements in order to become the best version of themselves, to emerge and to maybe co-design, co-develop something together as a whole community. And needless to say that this brings for the necessity of having a shared governance process, since learning is always a collective process. You learn, as I said also before, you learn when you're interconnected with others. Then, from ecosystem to arenas, what do I mean? Now we are facing this design problem of platforms from a very broad perspective, because regeneration, as we said, is something global. We can't regenerate in a silo, because we need to take into account a lot of important things like externalities, liabilities, interdependencies, and interactions between different ecosystems. So we really need to have a look at the particular with the design thinking and design practices, but also looking at the general and at the whole, at the interconnected. And with our toolkits, of course, we understood the importance of doing this, and we provided some guidance, some frameworks also to map ecosystem, try to understand what are the arenas in this ecosystem. So what are what the entities are looking for. Probably you're familiar with the concept of jobs to be done and how they're interacting. And then we find the platformization spaces where we can start with the design process, and then we can attach our enablers. So last but not least, because the least part and the most important is the conversational aspect. In an ecosystem, we typically refer to these entities, these types of entities, because these are very general labels for defining, maybe not definitely entities, but I prefer to use the term roles, because falling back on and reinforcing my the principle of designing for disobedience that I expressed, the only way to allow for capturing the unknown and supporting the creation of value from unknown directions from everywhere in an ecosystem, we need to understand who are the general roles that are interested, that are by our platform strategy and they want to create this value. And how we can do this? The good practice that we experience is that we can try to map all the entities in our ecosystem and then assign them into clusters and give to any cluster a label that is expressing their role, so their capability to interact with different clusters. And we are particularly interested in the entities and the roles that are strongly relational, and they are setting up multiple relational activities, multiple relational streams with other counterparts. So basically, peer producers, peer consumers, and partners. Partners and peer producers are belonging to the supply side of an ecosystem. They are providing value. And peer consumers, of course, are consuming value. Please note that I'm not speaking about consumers as final users or consumers in the consumeristic definition of a consumer of value. Of a consumer. I'm referring to a consumer of value. So consumer here could be other networks, could be other communities, other companies, other organizations. The same as peer producers and partners producing value could be other networks, other companies, other people, so whoever. And then we also have the stakeholders that are very important because they can impact the successfulness or the unsuccessfulness of a platform, but they are not entering into the daily relations. I'll close with an example. We typically use this simple canvas to map the interactions within an ecosystem between the supply side and the demand side. And typically, we are very interested into understanding who can produce and provide value and who can consume value. But what we found in our experience is that this boundary between who is consuming and who is producing value in a real ecosystem is very subtle, is very light. Because what happens in reality is that sometimes you are capable of consuming value, sometimes you're capable of producing value. Belonging to the same ecosystem, you are the same entity. But what is changes is that probably you are taking different roles. So sometimes the same entity can provide value, so it's taking the role of a producer of value, and maybe 1 minute after, the same entity is wearing the hat of another role and is consuming value. And probably the most important thing we can make today is understanding how these dynamic changes between roles and entities can happen, and how regeneration can impact or being impacted by this dynamicity of platform relationships. Then I'm just closing with the key questions for today, just igniting the conversation. And then, well, we are not that many, so luckily, since I don't know how much, sorry, I lost the interface. Well, we have 14, so we can just open the cameras, switch on the cameras, and we just give us the role that we speak one at a time. And once you're done, you mute yourself. And then if you want to speak, you unmute yourself and speak. And the key inspiring questions are, so first of all, a positive question. How can platforms enable new regenerative patterns? And then a negative ones. What are the liabilities of platforms when implementing regenerative patterns? Or generally speaking, liabilities of platforms, so we can stop on the first part of the question. And then if you want to go more, what's the role and impact of scalable learning in regeneration? So how platforms offering this capability to scale learning can support regeneration? And then what does it mean to reduce transaction costs, connecting more niches globally? So reducing transaction costs, sorry, maybe I was not clear on this one. Then I shut up, promise. Reducing transaction costs means that more and more smaller and fragmented entities, if a platform is capable of reducing the entry barriers and making transactions that before they weren't sustainable, but now, thanks to the platform intervention, they are becoming sustainable for a larger audience, for smaller and smaller players. This means that a platform can enable more elements, more players, more entities, more roles to start exchanging value, to start providing their value. And this is probably what we want, because that way we can reach finer and finer granularities up to individuals that are maybe taking their own responsibility to regenerate and build value in a regenerative approach. So that's why I strongly believe, well, I'm polarized, I'm biased. I'm working with platform thinking all the day, but that's why I think that positively shaped platform could be very good interfaces to do this. Then I shut up, and I'm just one of you speaking and conversating around these elements.
I was just looking at from the presentation, at looking at different ecosystem that are collaborating. Will that be considered another form of platform also, because they can actually create a network effect just among collaboration of different ecosystem? If there's more ecosystem that join that and create a platform, just a thought.
Sorry, again, just to be clear, so we can open conversate on this. So I don't want to reply in a traditional Q&A. Yeah? So it's open to every point of view. So just open your mic and speak. Ideally, if you can, maybe you can switch on your cameras. It's a little better, because then we can look into our eyes. But of course, I mean, if you can't, don't worry.
I think she had the camera in a different window. Mafe. Actually.
My camera, my voice coming from a different window.
Okay. No, okay. Sorry. No, but sorry, but I was not referring to you, Jenny.
Oh, it's okay.
I have a question, Luca, if I can. Mm-hmm. So when you say what are the liabilities of platforms when implementing generative patterns, like can you explain a bit more what you mean with these liabilities?
No, I can't explain, but I can give you maybe my point of view, of course. So I start from a very stupid example. No, we all know that plastic bags are very inexpensive, no, because we can purchase a plastic bag with, I don't know, a few cents. But that doesn't mean that the real cost of a plastic bag is 5 cents. So the cost is way higher. So if we only know in advance that by throwing away a plastic bag, then we can damage the environment for 1,000 years, well, maybe too much, 100 years. Now, probably the cost of a plastic bag should be 100 euros, and maybe a cost of a paper bag or a reusable bag, 1-2 euros. So this is the typical consequence of hiding, offloading liabilities of what we do in value chains, in the composing something and something like this. Then platforms, we typically create these, platform try to organize value spaces in ecosystems. And they're pretty agnostic, no, because when you run a platform design approach, when you design a platform, you're just observing what happens. You observe what are the minus and the plus of the entities, and you try to enable them. So it's aseptic. But this is also not really true, because then we have examples of positive platform and example of negative platforms. Now we have example in the gig economy, in the workforce management platforms, but also in technical platforms. Now, ideally, we can also even touch Bitcoin and tokens. No, tokens has a powerful capability they have a powerful capability to enable economic space design, but they are consuming a lot of electricity, for instance. So the environmental footprint of a blockchain is huge. So my point is, I don't even know how to input the liabilities and the weight of these externalities in the platform design, because I don't know where we should stop putting the boundaries of when the ecosystem ends and when I stop thinking about externalities and liabilities. I really don't know, so it's not rhetoric. No, it's there are examples. There are people that are trying to, for instance, replace the GDP profit measurement thresholds for governments with something that takes into account the quality of life instead of just the marginality. They're just tentatives, experiments. So really, I really would like to, be inspiring to going in some directions to understand more of what could be, how to take liability weight into account when we design platforms.
Okay, then I understand.
That's my point.
Yeah, no, I think I didn't understand the question. I thought you were talking about liabilities once you have created regenerative patterns. So I was thinking about, which could also happen probably. But then it's more clear what the question was about. Yeah, I think just as a comment, I think like I agree with you that it can be like dangerous to some extent to say that platforms are just following like the ecosystem, because it's like shaving off some responsibility maybe, which I guess is happening a lot with those platforms that live in that old economic paradigm somehow, no? So maybe it's the whole system that forced that platform operate in this logic and then can create the same externalities that previously was maybe possible at a smaller scale, and now it can be on a very large scale. So I don't know. Yeah, I also don't have obviously an answer, but it's interesting to think about. Yeah, where is the limit, and who decides? Participants, like policy?
If I may add, yesterday I was invited in one of a meeting, and the founder of Pyron was there. He is considered the father of Siri, and he was Igor. It was difficult to pronounce his last name. But it's interesting what he said about platforms, about creating an innovation. He says, nobody just all of a sudden wake up and say, okay, I'm going to be unethical to these people. So when they actually start doing such things like Facebook, how they started and then how they expand. Amazon, it's the same thing, right? They were only gonna sell books, and all of a sudden somebody's looking for wiper for the car, and so he was explaining this. And even Siri, when they were thinking about this 10 years ago, was to help people with disabilities, and yet now people with no disability also use it, and it just opened. And it's I think when developing what we are developing here is to consider where is it began, and to how are we in creating the new models and a better model for regenerative ecosystem, to not blame the past, to not coming from blame or criticism, but rather understanding where it truly came from, so that we could continue the goodness from which they had left off. Because all of a sudden there are problems and liabilities, but where can we augment that and mend that or heal that, so we could truly be embracing a true regenerative ecosystem.
I think continuing on that
please, Lina, please.
Okay. For me, continuing on that point, reminds me of, well, just iterative design. It's a part of the process. And if you're thinking about it as it's a continuum of creativity, that it doesn't end, it keeps on developing. And that perhaps there could be things in the system of where people can be liable based on the principles and intent that was covered earlier, because that way, I think it's also important to embed ethical design principles into things. And I think if those weren't there in the first place in terms of the intent, then when people are creating different kinds of products, services, platforms, and whatnot, they can be mindful of those things, and they can ask themselves and reflect as a team or an ecosystem or stakeholders on those types of things.
I'm quite grateful for what you brought in, Luca, in terms of, what is the embeddedness of platform design activities, the platform when they're running and expanding and so on within ecosystem limits that regenerative approaches would tend to respect more than business as usual is doing it. At the same time, I don't know, because the platform design toolkit that is currently designed is coming from this business modeling tradition and has a strong imprint from that. And the questions we are trying to tackle here are also coming from that. I mean, you necessarily you were very open and transparent on this, saying that the whole day you're working on platform design and helping platform designers to develop new platforms and so on. So that's very understandable to have this perspective. So if I may, I want to bring in the perspective, because I'm working all day long with regenerative practitioners. And I tried to work with them on platform design and failed several times. And this was an interesting experience to find out why that happens. And one point, for instance, is that this design and language of producer and consumer is disconcerting for many regenerative practitioners, because that's not the focus of their intention. Basically, it's better to consume less, to produce less, to work less, to travel less, in terms of planetary boundaries perspective. So the approach to enhance sufficiency and not producing more services and still another heap of transactions through digital tools and so on, would be the more appropriate perspective from that planetary boundaries framework. So this is one example, and the other aspect of it is that, as you already mentioned as well, there's a lot of co-creation activity among multiple stakeholders happening to address these planetary challenges. And this is also currently difficult to map using the current version of the platform design toolkit. So how can we have really true complex multi-stakeholder co-creation processes supported by appropriate design tools is a question that is often asked as well.
Well, for the second part, I have an answer. I mean, for the first one, of course not. So, but before going to this answer, I love, so Vicky, brought something very interesting on the chat. So now, like Elon Musk Neuralink brain chip in a monkey for health, or maybe experimentation in general. No, I was thinking about similar thing, because very often we mention Amazon as a disclaimer. I'm not neither defending nor adversing Amazon particularly, but I love to use this example because Amazon is always used also by us as an example of bad profits, so of negative behaviors and toxic behavior of platforms. because of many reasons. I'm not saying that this is not wrong. So because they are squeezing down the marginalities of the shops, the suppliers, they are typically commoditizing workforces, so they're reducing their freedom and their salaries and so on. But then there is also the other flip of the coin, no? Because in any case, Amazon is hiring a lot of people, is providing a lot of possibility to, for instance, be hired and also have a salary. So the problem is understanding. Yeah.
Sorry to briefly interrupt. We decided to take the breakouts up until the full hour, so you still have 22 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
You don't need to rush that through.
Okay, thanks. So this is the same problem, for instance, that happened in Italy with the gig economy, with Foodora, Deliveroo. So at some point, since the institutions were not able to understand the liabilities of a platform entering the market, they blocked it. Because the only reaction that you have at institutional level when you're not capable of understanding and reading with accuracy and with real timeness of a phenomenon, you block it. I mean, well, or you allow it, or you allow it, or you block it. But as soon as someone complains about it, you block it. But instead, no one, for instance, try to understand if maybe for those workers, even poorly paid, because I do admit they were poorly paid, maybe that very low pay was something better respect to what they had before. The same for Amazon now. So would you prefer? I'm just speaking about a general example, no? So it's always very tricky to understand when a positive behavior stops and when a negative one ends, and vice versa. So as Vicky pointed out in the chat, I don't have answers for this. I just have a quick answer and then I shut up on the scalability of platform when dealing with networks of networks. Basically, the platforms are like fractals. So what mean, you don't change the framework of design that you use. What you change is that your roles that you're mapping are not entities, are not even individual companies, but they are other networks or other platforms. And so you try to understand what a platform can provide in terms of value and what another platform, another network maybe can consume. And then, as I said, 1 minute after, they can invert the roles and provide back the value.
Yeah, but that's we've had this discussion, Luca. I mean, this is the way of framing it through the lens you've created with the platform design toolkit. That's not how people feel it's actually working in reality when they are in a co-creation process. It's not microtransaction following each other. It's the shared space in which new ideas, new meaning, new whatever is co-created in a shared process. So and that's for me a big question. In particular, if we relate it back to commons-based models, I mean, the pro-social is based on this commons thinking, for instance, and was explained earlier. And commons-based models are quite recurrent in the regenerative practitioner space, and the question is how that can relate to how practitioners can co-create commons and then also use the commons they've co-created for whatever they need to do in the regenerative space. So there's this aspect of commons that is perhaps not yet properly represented in platform design approach as you have currently put it. Might be an additional engine or I don't know what. So it's just I'm just speculating, but it feels like there's a missing link. To focus on or think along the idea of commons in the context of platform design. What would that mean? So question I carry with me for some time, and I have no definite answer, but probably that's a valuable perspective to look at.
I'm thinking of I'm thinking out loud. Isn't it that the platform is where we go, and although we're kind of modeling for regenerative ecosystem, and the contents are the shared knowledge information that we have. Isn't that I'm trying to understand what you were explaining, Marcus. Like, for example, in Facebook, the platform is Facebook, and the contents are the photos, whatever is shared in the network, and all the network effects was created by the shared knowledge. That's why all the people and friends come together because of all this, and they are willingly sharing all this information. So if I were to transcend that to regenerative ecosystem, which is to use a kind of similar thing, but beyond that, is to create a different model with different contents, with different set of guidance, instead of rules. And how do we is that the thought that you were sharing, Marcus? I'm just asking.
I think it's not only the rules and content, because even like when you go on Facebook or other social media, like the patterns, the design patterns are addictive, and they make you keep on doing. It's like Las Vegas, like the one art machine. They keep you on the platform, and by scrolling endless, you want to see more. So this is one thing that a designer definitely should look at. And the other point is like, based on some, you have to define values. I think this is the base. And the other thing is like, watch how people are living together. We used to live together in villages. Where like when you work in teams, everybody knows if you are more than 10 people, we're not really reaching things. So, and if you want to collaborate on a higher scale, I think then you have to think about, there's already Miro, like a tool like this. Maybe you have to think about something else than a platform where people get connected. I think it's a different level of thinking.
I think so. Yeah, I think even the term platform might be misleading for this further evolutionary step. As what you're pointing at might be something like multi-layered transformation ecosystems, because we need to find also appropriate trade-offs between the time you can spend on a screen to connect to peers in other places of the planet, and what you need to do in your local community. So I hear very often from people in regenerative networks that they want to spend more time with the people in the community rather than more time on the screen. And that's and I also know that people have different, let's say, preferences and talents for working at different scales. And what we often do not have is scale linking or a distribution of tasks across scales, from local to regional to national to international scales. On this scale linking, I don't know, perhaps it can also be platformized, I don't know, but this is often missing.
Yeah, it's like the platforms right now are fragmenting people. They are not connecting. In the very beginning, they were connecting, but now they're separating us by, basically by, by using them right now. So maybe there's we have to think about an interconnection of the real world and the online world, and how can we reduce the online time and increase the other time. But also, I mean, if you don't live in the same locality, you know, how can you connect anyway? So I think it's like more closer to the human interaction, you know.
Well, I will not be able to connect with all of you from another side of the world without the network. And the beauty of it is with the time zones and all this that seemingly are dividing us, I could actually remove that. So I will put the time zone on the side and I will wake up whenever the other side of the country is awake. So there's certain things that what I like about what Rain, you're speaking of, and of course Marcus, is that we could, from values, we could decide that. So storytelling is still important if we are raising our children, and to be able to use this as a tool to actually expand us and expand our reach, expand our know-how and all this, because we can only control something that we know. So I'm very fascinated on learning. I'm very new in technology as well. It's not even a year, but for me to know what it is, then I could know how to control that. Or how now I'm like, okay, I can be ethical because I know what it is to be ethical as a company in terms of data and all this, because that's instilled by my institute, from my school. And without that, I will never know, right? So this is important conversation, and what used to divide us can now actually unite us.
And yeah, I think Luca, you wanted to say something, and I just I was thinking about, yeah, when you're talking, I think this is an equation that is very hard to crack. Like platforms are like speeding up the way we can transact, the way we can exchange knowledge, whatever. But the problem is that the regeneration seems to me, listening from like what Marcus and Reinhild shared, is a high trust context, which is more complex. It's more based on like human relationships with environment, in a bioregion, and so on. So it's like, and there is where I think, and we've had some interesting discussions with ProSocial and the methodology for managing commons. So something that, how I see could be a way to marry those will be that you think about the transactions not as capitalistic transactions like Marcus was mentioning, like that we frame them currently, but you could actually think about that kind of process as if that would be designed into whatever transaction a platform is enabling. Then you would start to see something, and it would probably not scale as fast, and it would probably not be like these unicorns that would be exponential immediately, because it would take more time and it would be conflictual and it would be like much more complex. But this is kind of how I would see bringing this shared language that we also talked about in this session to make, because the technology is there, so it's going to be sort of, we're not going to get away from the technology. I think it's probably just going to be more and more pervasive in our lives as well. So the questions go together, I think.
But I mean, it's an illusion. I was to use technology in this. You know, I was working on a very complex software. We were creating it in an international context, but we were all missing the human touch. So. And it's sometimes more creative, you know, when you're together and things, you know, you have a coffee and so this is missing. This part is really missing. So I think it's very cool that we can meet all over the world, you know, we can interact. But I believe there is something, like everybody who has been working for the last year only online knows that, you know, there's a fatigue, and we have to find a way how to come together, how to share our, I mean, we also you know, have different values, not only different values, but also different cultures. So if you work together with somebody in China, they're ticking completely different. And to integrate that kind of, you know, it's a quest.
Now you stimulated a very strong emerging image that I was having, because I was taking notes, and so originally the note I took was, well, platforms are connecting us globally, but are disconnecting us locally.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now a quick note I took while listening to you. But this let me reflect on the fact that probably what is different from me is the concept of locality. So I don't know what is local for me anymore, because my local is, I'm living in Rome in Italy now, but my local, especially in the last 2 years of, I mean, from the first COVID lockdown, sorry, my new local has become this, because I'm having continuous connection with amazing people all over the world across all time zones. And this is my local now, because I can very easily reach a person that maybe is living in Las Vegas or in the East Coast or in the Eastern Europe. I find it harder to meet a person that maybe lives in my same building, but because I don't know what I can tell this person, I don't find opportunities. So no, just to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm coming back to the I say poetry of rural areas. The problem is that I don't find any not value is the wrong word. I don't know how I can interact proactively in these geographically, physically local environments, because my life is here now. So I mean, it's very disconnected. Sorry for this, but I was just thinking that maybe sorry, I need to slow down. We typically say that platforms are helping growing economies locally, but interconnected globally. And this is typically true, because platforms, they can be both in real life and online. So a platform is not always digital. A platform is a strategy, and then you can have it in the real life and also online. And typically the online is an enabler. So we used to say this mantra, platforms are growing value locally, but interconnecting globally. But now I'm not sure anymore about this, because I don't know what local is for me.
Local would be a meetup, maybe offline.
But
Who knows? I mean, so
Yeah.
a local economy. Now we are reflecting, for instance, on local economies in the sense of helping group of farmers and local food producers to produce their own food and sell it locally. This is an idea of local business. And I like it. I love it. So I also have a very short, a very small area in my garden when I'm cultivating food. But probably local in the platform age is something extended. So it can have multiple meanings.
Technically, yeah, I think you have to consider what your needs are when you talk about local. If you think local is meeting with my friends online, or like being, having friends online, it doesn't matter where they are. Or like meeting somebody physically, is local. I mean, maybe those are different layers too,
I can relate to what you're saying, Luca. I mean, I've been born a foreigner. I'm still a foreigner everywhere I go. So I always, and also I speak and interact with different languages and cultures. So this thing that you mentioned about local, it starts to be, I think for me, it's become more about familiarity rather than local, because I can connect with different languages and cultures and ideas. And perhaps the platform is going to sound a bit, it starts to go away from the physical and the digital, but it's going to a different kind of transient type of place of where you're bringing in, yeah, it's just kind of like a higher dimension of where you're of consciousness. So it's your local becomes whoever you're able to connect with at a conscious level, whether it's the language, the culture, the food, be it in the same physical space or somewhere across the globe. Like, for example, let's take the example, you're from Rome. everybody loves Italian food. You can connect with people all over the world with Italian food, for example. That's your local, but it's also now become their local Italian restaurant. So then, so that's what I mean by perhaps looking at it from a more, expansive, imaginative, non-tangible way. I don't know if I'm expressing myself clearly, but
One of the things that came up for me also is the word inclusion. So when we're talking about these communities that, like, for example, if I were to create the communities, what would my community be? And how can it be inclusive? How can I consider beyond local? Because some of these people are reaching out also to be included. So this is some of the things that's coming up to me, and some of them will raise their hand and say, I wanna learn that also. And if we inspire them to learn it, so it's kind of, it's fascinating, and like